I'm going to start with verses 13 and 14. Now behold, two of them were traveling that same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they talked together of all the things which had happened. Now we're not told in Scripture why they're going to Emmaus. We just know that they're leaving Jerusalem, two of them, and they're going off to Emmaus. Cleopas is one of them, we know from the Scriptures. The other one we have no idea who it is. But they're traveling, and it's a 7-mile journey. So we know that they're leaving later in the day, because you can walk 7 miles in a day. But you get toward the end of the day, you don't make 7 miles before the sun goes down. So they end up stopping on the way. We know it was in the end of the day. We know that things already happened in the morning they're aware of. But here they are. They're walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and they're talking about all the things which happened. What things? Well, they still are in shock that the one they thought the Messiah is dead. The one that they put all their hope and their trust in. The one that did all these miracles. The one that raised Tabitha from the dead. The one that took the woman's son, the widow's son, and brought him back to life. The one that fed 5,000. The one that walked on water. They're recounting all these things that surely he was the one, wasn't it? But how could they have taken him? Our rulers and our leaders, they had to know that he was Messiah. Why would they do what they did? It's not making sense. The high priest testified to this. They killed him. And they're talking about this. Because now we don't know where he is, because those crazy women go to the tomb, and the stone's gone, and the body's gone, and no one can find Jesus. This is all the things they're talking about. They're trying to put everything in perspective. It's been a wild, wild weekend, as you can imagine. Everything that has happened, and they still can't comprehend it all. In verses 15 and 16 it says, while it was they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained, so they did not know him. He was incognito. He kept walking up, and best I can picture his road to Emmaus. Some of you may picture this like there were just these two people walking on a lonely dirt road, but that's not it. And the roads, they were always traffic on there. Think of it more like when you're walking in a mall and people going all directions all the time. That's probably like it was. And all of a sudden, one comes alongside these two that are walking together, and he's with them. They don't understand who he is. And while they converse and they reason, they're deep in thought, they're deep in conversation, that Jesus himself, he draws near and he's in their presence. He's right there with them. But they couldn't recognize who he was. And they're probably wondering, what is this guy doing? He's probably alone. He's someone to travel with. He's going to be tailing us the whole way. But they don't understand, and they don't know who this is that comes near. In verse 17, it's incredible. Jesus is going to break his silence. He's been listening to what they're saying. And then this is what he addresses. What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another, and as you walk, you're sad? What's going on? So as he's listening to what's going on, he asks them, what are you talking about? I mean, and why are you guys so sad? You're so down the mouth. You're walking along here, and you're just having all this negative talk, and nothing positive is coming out. What are you guys talking about? Now, at this point, I can picture both of them stopping dead in their tracks and looking right at him. Because they have this response in verse 18. Cleopas, the only reason he has his name anywhere in the Bible is one time, because he's the one that spoke up first. So it says, then the one named Cleopas answered and said to him, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known the things which have happened in these days? He said, are you kidding me? Why are we talking about these things? Why are we sad? So have you been under a rock, man? Do you not know what is going on in Jerusalem? Everyone knows what happened in Jerusalem. Everyone knows what we're talking about. From the highest to the lowest in Jerusalem. That's all anyone's talking about. How can you say, what are you talking about? Why are we sad? Jesus, the one who thought the Messiah, is dead. And now not only is he dead, he's missing. And angels have talked about his disappearance and his resurrection. We don't know what's going on. We're trying to figure things out. And how can you say what's going on? Everyone knew that Jesus was executed. And the word spread even faster. They couldn't find his corpse. You know who wanted to find Jesus' dead body more than anyone else? His enemies. If they had the corpse of Jesus, they had a victory. But if they didn't, what they said was, we have to guard this tomb because remember what that deceiver said. In 3 days he would rise again. They're going to steal his body. They're going to tell everyone he rose. So we have to have the body to prove he didn't rise. All his enemies wanted his body worse than anyone. They couldn't find him. And then in verse 19a, the first part, after the apostle answers him and says, where have you been that you don't know these things? Jesus just goads him a little bit with just 2 words. What things? They stop again. They don't even know who he is. What in the world is he talking about? This guy is nuts. He goes on to a discourse in 19b through 24. He just is going to fill him in. Since he doesn't know what's going on, he's going to give them this background information. So they said to him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, remember him? You should know him. Everyone's talking about him. He was a prophet, mighty in deed and in word before God and all the people. And how the chief priests and the rulers delivered him to be condemned to death. And they crucified him. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they could not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but him they did not see. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about Jesus. You know, the prophet from Nazareth. He did all these wonderful miracles. He fed 5,000. He healed lepers. He restored the eyes of the blind. And that was a sign for only the Messiah. No one's ever made anyone see again who was blind. That was a messianic prophecy only for the Messiah. And Jesus did it. He had to be the one. But our chief priests and our rulers, they condemned him to death. And we're still figuring out why would they do that to someone if they knew he was the Messiah. We can't make any sense of it. And they crucified him. This is the 3rd day. And here's the kicker. Ladies went to the tomb really early in the morning. And the stone was moved. The guards were gone. They saw a vision of angels saying he was risen. And we can't find him. That's what we're talking about. That's the things, if you really want to know, that we're discussing. So he goes through all this discourse. He fills them in. And then Jesus is going to speak up. He's going to speak up in verses 25 and 27. And look what he says to them. Then he says to them, O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe, and all that the prophets have spoken, ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and then enter in his glory? Shouldn't these things have happened according to Scripture? Isn't it what the Scripture says about the Messiah? If you really knew him, you would know what was going to happen to him. And at the beginning of Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in the Scriptures all the things concerning himself. Now, there are some places in Scripture you want to be, and there are some places you don't want to be. You don't want to be with Jonah in the belly of the whale. That's not where you want to be. If you say, I want to be in Scripture, and that's not where you want to be. If I could be any place besides in front of the throne, I want to be here. Can you imagine Jesus Christ opening up Scriptures? He gives an exposition on the Scriptures of himself like no one else can do. See, this is where these two, they went to Emmaus, they came back, they had all their seminary training. They were done. They had known more than they could learn in a lifetime. They had one discourse with Jesus Christ, revealing everywhere in the Old Testament about himself. That's what he accomplished. They listened verbally as Jesus dictated his oral biography. That's what he did. As Jesus started in Genesis, and every time a messianic passage came up and said, this is the Messiah. This is the Christ. This is what happened here. This is why this was written. That's why this happened. And he goes through the entire Old Testament. Now, it was a long walk, but they had more than they bargained. From this text, they listened as Jesus pointed out every place in the Scriptures of himself. Can you imagine? They probably had lockjaw. It dropped and it froze open. They couldn't believe everything they were hearing. They were completely amazed and overwhelmed by such incredible insight. And can you imagine when they went back? They could teach anybody anything about Jesus. If they remembered half of what he said, they would be a scholar. So starting with Genesis, Jesus reveals the Messiah to his followers. And they still don't know it's him. He just amazed them. There's a song by Aaron Jeffries that attempts to point out Jesus in the Scripture. Now, I want to just read the words. I'm going to read the Old Testament and New Testament. You can listen to the whole song yourself. It's called He Is. And it's by Aaron Jeffries. And I hope that you will pull it up and listen to that yourself. It's an incredible song. Every time I listen to it, it's overwhelming. It gives you goosebumps. And it just, because you know who Jesus is.